With The Rise of Skywalker coming out soon, I could take this opportunity to give my honest thoughts on the Disney Star Wars trilogy. But then I thought, nah, I'd rather talk about the good Star Wars movies. I'm just kidding. Today's video isn't meant to piss people off. I've wanted to talk about Star Wars for a while. More specifically, the original trilogy and why I love it so much. Someday I'll get to the real juicy takes with the other trilogies, but today I want to be positive. So without further ado, here are my thoughts on the original Star Wars trilogy. You want to know how I know Letterboxd is the best movie rating website? Because A New Hope is listed as Star Wars on it, whereas IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes listed as Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Also, Rotten Tomatoes is fucking trash. To be honest, I'm not one of those Star Wars purists that refuse to call it A New Hope. I think calling it that makes it easier to differentiate which movie I'm talking about, rather than just saying, my favorite movie is Star Wars. Oh, by the way, yes, you heard right. The original Star Wars is my favorite movie of all time. I'm not saying that as a Star Wars stan, I truly mean it. This is my favorite film of all time. And I've thought about that a lot. Mainly, why? What makes this so special compared to other movies I love? I definitely won't call it the greatest film of all time, because there are things that kinda drag it down. I'm not just talking about the plot holes when compared to the rest of the franchise, because that's not really the fault of the movie. It's the fault of George Lucas wanting everything to rhyme like poetry and failing hilariously. The dialogue is especially weird in this movie. There's many scenes where you're left just scratching your head wondering, wait, what did they say? Take for example any scene that Leia is in the first half of the movie.
The Imperial Senate will not sit still for this.
No, Alderaan is peaceful.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, Governor Tarkin. I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash. No. I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board. No, one.
To be fair, basically a lot of what anyone is saying is, for lack of a better word, cringe.
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
The fuck are you talking about?
It's not the worst written dialogue in Star Wars because,
I don't like Sam.
Maybe people that create things aren't concerned with your
Delicate sensibility.
Okay, you get it. Not a fan of the way Georgie Boy writes how people talk. I think that's about it, though. I mean, if Spider-Verse didn't have that much I didn't like, I would imagine my favorite movie of all time doesn't have that much negatives in it either. So what about the rest of the movie? What is it I like about this film? Well, only everything. The great thing about A New Hope is that it's pretty much the only movie out of the entire franchise that you can watch having not seen the other movies, because everyone thought it was the first and only movie to be titled Star Wars. Because of that, the story is structured in a way that anyone can follow. It's often seen as the closest story to follow Joseph Campbell's hero's journey template. Some people see that as a disadvantage because it's not trying anything new. That also means it's not screwing up anything either. I can't tell you how many times I've been disappointed by a movie with cool visuals or a concept I like, only to have the writing and characters drag it down. I feel like there's a great balance here though. A simple story with likable characters while also having some really impressive technical feats in cinema history. The effects still hold up to this day. I know exactly how they filmed the climax, but I still have no problem believing the ships are actually flying in space. The music is incredible. Even the worst Star Wars movies have amazing scores. My favorite moment is when Luke is looking at the twin suns and wanting to experience more in his mundane life. It's a typical Disney protagonist goal, but here it's implied through Luke's expressions and the music. That's the key word here. Implied. The movie doesn't tell you these things, you as the audience are shown. The only time Star Wars ever tells you anything is through the text crawl at the beginning. The rest of the movie shouldn't hold your hand having to over-explain everything. I also really love the scene when Luke hears Obi-Wan during the climax and has to make a choice. Trust the Force or the ship's targeting computer. It shows how much Luke has grown in just one movie, and we have 2 movies left where he grows some more. That also really shows how much this movie was saved in the editing process. If this film was edited differently, even slightly, maybe a different theme played or they included voiceover, it would not work as well. Like I said, this movie doesn't tell you anything. Could you imagine if Luke had some inner dialogue and how distracting that would be? It'd be like that weird puppet movie I've heard so much about. What's it called? Labyrinth? And sure, maybe that doesn't make it the best Star Wars film, but that's not what I'm saying. I don't see this as the best Star Wars movie, nor the best movie in general. It's my favorite when comparing it to other films. Will it always be this way? I don't know. All I know is that I've loved this movie since the first time I watched it, and I still love it to this day. So I'm giving it a very solid and very biased 10 out of 10. Okay, let's get my first Star Wars hot take out there. Growing up, I didn't like Empire Strikes Back.
You what?
I certainly didn't hate it, I just liked Return of the Jedi more, but I'll get to that later. As for Empire, I guess I didn't like it because it didn't end on a satisfying note. Luke found out about Vader being the daddy now, and ham salad got frozen, and then the movie ends. As a child, I wasn't very happy.
What the fuck?
However, now that I'm older, I've grown to appreciate it more. A lot of people have called this one of the greatest sequels of all time, and I tend to agree. After the monster hit that the first one was, how do you top it? Do you try and recapture the magic of the first one, or do you take a risk and try something different? Expand upon the universe, not just with new characters, locations, or technologies, but also expand upon the themes of the original. Have the characters go through much more difficult obstacles, learn new skills, and grow as people. Have the villains be more threatening than the last movie. They may not have a giant space weapon, but they still have power over most of the galaxy. When Han and the gang are captured in Cloud City, Vader doesn't use his lightsaber or the Death Star. He uses the power of the Empire and its influence on the galaxy. I love that. He makes a deal with Lando, and even then still alters the deal just to show that they are in control of everything. This film's main goal is to show that Star Wars is not your typical sci-fi movie franchise. It actually shows there are consequences to the rebels if they don't succeed in their mission. Seeing the twist of Vader being Luke's father is such a powerful scene. Luke sees Vader as this final boss, the most hated man in the galaxy, and yet it's his own father. It's so tragic. Luke has been training the whole movie to become a better Jedi, and he fails when he gets away. That's what I love about Luke. He's not some chosen one or some Randy that can use the Force right away. He's a dweeb. He's not super powerful. He struggles with the Force, but he's still determined to do the right thing. I've heard the argument that Leia should have been the main character of the franchise, and I completely disagree. Leia doesn't have anything to prove. She's already proven she's capable of leading the rebellion and handling situations herself. Luke has everything to prove in being the one to defeat Vader and the Empire. I would much rather watch the main characters struggle to prove themselves than watch the main character already a confident badass and never change throughout the trilogy. So yeah, seeing this movie now, I can say I love it even more than when I was younger. Is it my favorite of the trilogy though?
No!
I'd put Empire as my second favorite. I mentioned that this movie is a great sequel, but that's the key word here. Sequel. Watching this movie feels like you're watching a continuation of a story, not a singular story all in itself. And I would much prefer if a movie was able to stand on its own. Movies like The Dark Knight, Toy Story 2, and even Blade Runner 2049 to an extent are better at being sequels that stand on their own. They begin and end in a way that you feel like you don't need to see the other movies to get a complete story, whereas Empire feels like only the middle. It's a really solid middle for sure, but a middle nonetheless. And sure, maybe that's just a personal preference of mine. Maybe some people don't mind the incompleteness, and that's fine. Again, like I said, I'm not saying these are why I think these are the best Star Wars movies, rather why they're my favorite. Anyway, I'm giving Empire Strikes Back a 10 out of 10. I still really love it. Return of the Jedi is not as great as the other two. Some people often see it as the beginning of the end for Star Wars. Some even called it the worst Star Wars movie at one point. Well, now we know better. Anyway, yes, I'd probably say that Return of the Jedi is my least favorite out of the original trilogy, but that's like saying The Dark Knight Rises is my least favorite out of the Nolan Batman trilogy. It is, but I still really love it. Except Return of the Jedi is way better than Dark Knight Rises. This is not the powerhouse sequel that Empire was, and I feel that's a huge reason why people don't like it as much. It doesn't try anything new story-wise. I mean, it opens with a second Death Star. No more of the Empire trying to use their wits to defeat the rebels. They have a giant space weapon again that's built exactly like the last one, only bigger.
There's always a bigger fish.
Also, Han Solo is okay, you guys. He was just resting. He's not dead. It's okay. Look at the funny alien teddy bears. Okay, let's do this. The Ewoks are admittedly kinda lame. They're essentially what the 80s version of a minion would be. A cute, marketable species that are made for toys and not the story of the movie. I'll be honest and say, yeah, they are pretty dumb. But do I care? No, I think these fuckers are pretty funny. They certainly aren't the worst creatures in Star Wars. Just wait until Episode 1 when Lucas thought it was a good idea to have an obvious comic relief character. Also, porgs are lame. Don't try and defend them. Even people who like The Last Jedi probably won't defend them. I should also mention the other elephant in the room and say, yeah, Jabba's palace goes on for way too long. Especially the special edition version where we have a weird music video for no reason. Congrats, you made us realize that CGI can age worse than practical effects. The only reason this section is in here is because they're rescuing Han Solo, but he doesn't really do anything important for the rest of the movie. He's not dead weight or anything, but if we were to be in Jabba's palace for that long, you'd think it would be because the rebels really needed him for something. I mean, whatever, we have Han Solo back, that's all that really matters, so I'm happy. Okay, enough negatives about Return of the Jedi. I actually really do like this movie. Luke Skywalker is the best version of himself in this movie. I may like A New Hope and Empire more, but as far as I'm concerned, Jedi has the best version of Luke. From the first moment we see him in Jabba's palace, you know immediately that he's changed from the moment we first met him in the first movie. He's not a know-it-all badass, but he's certainly more capable of taking on a couple of bad guys by himself. He's grown as a character while also staying true to who he really is on the inside. I also really love how he's wearing black the whole movie, foreshadowing if he's going to turn to the dark side or not. only to reveal at the end that he was wearing white underneath, showing that he was always good no matter what. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too deep into that, but that's how I see it. We're also introduced to Palpatine in this movie, and I'm not gonna lie, he's alright. This is the first time we actually meet this character, and we don't really get a whole lot from him. To be honest, he's way better in Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, I said it. He certainly has his moments, like when he's electrocuting Luke, and Vader has to make a decision, either to save his son or stand by the Emperor's side again. It's a powerful scene that still amazes me to this day. Palpatine has such a threatening presence, and for the first time in the series, I find myself rooting for Vader. Even Vader's death scene is powerful. The character is someone we've hated for 2 movies, and now that he's dying, we're left heartbroken for him. He admits he was wrong, and he let his anger and hatred get the best of him. If I had to choose a favorite scene from Star Wars as a franchise, it would definitely be Vader's death. Everything is great in this scene, from the acting to the music. It's all amazing. Seeing a character you're supposed to hate struggle to his last breath just so he can say to the main character that he was right. I'll be honest, this scene still brings a tear to my eye. It's such a great moment in Star Wars as a whole. It's just too bad it's in the same movie as this scene.
Chewie, wait, don't!
So despite all my problems, why do I still defend this movie when I know it has a lot of issues? Well, same reason I defend A New Hope. Same reason I defend a lot of my favorite films. They're all not perfect, but they all have elements to them that I find special, and I'm able to see the positives more over than the negatives. Return of the Jedi is a tad messy at times, but I don't mind. I still love this movie with all my heart, which is why I'm also giving it a 10 out of 10. Yes, I gave them all 10 out of 10s, don't judge. I often feel like Star Wars can't be talked about anymore without an asterisk attached when you say you like it. I like Star Wars, but it's pretty frustrating to see one of my favorite movie franchises devolve into a political issue amongst nerds. I'm not taking any sides either. I feel like anytime someone takes the opportunity to talk about Star Wars, it's always about how the sexist nerds ruined it, or the SJWs over at Disney are ruining it. I'm sick and tired of seeing channels devote themselves to needlessly shit all over the current state of Star Wars, and who is to blame over it sucking now. I'm also sick of seeing people defend any of the movies so passionately that they consider these part of their personality. I'm not saying people shouldn't be passionate about things, but there is a limit where we need to figure out, is this worth my time defending? Should I really be obsessed with this as much as I am? I used to be pretty obsessed with Star Wars a while back, and while I wasn't obsessed with it to the point that I was ruining relationships with people or blinding myself with nostalgia, it did get to a point where I had to step back and think, what is it I like about these movies? Do I like the franchise for real, or do I like what I perceive the franchise as? I don't feel the same way about Star Wars now as I did back in 2014 when that first Force Awakens teaser dropped online. I've actually watched these movies with a new perspective, and I'm trying to figure out what it is I like and dislike about each movie. I love the original trilogy, not just because of nostalgia, but because I've grown to appreciate the simplicity of them all. They don't seem like the prequels or the Disney sequels where they feel like they're trying to be some big, grand, epic film with complex stories and everyone talks like they're saying the most important shit. They feel like a story about a rebellion fighting an oppressive empire, a story about a farm boy going on an adventure of a lifetime, a simple story about good versus evil. Yeah, it's too simple for today's standards of storytelling, but it doesn't need to be anything more. It's just a fun trilogy with groundbreaking effects, likable characters, and something I can return to every once in a while and think, yeah, I love this a lot. I can understand not loving these movies, trust me, there's plenty of classic or beloved films that I don't get the hype for. That doesn't mean I think anyone who likes them are wrong, it just means I couldn't appreciate them like some other people could. I don't want to be negative when talking about Star Wars. I just want to be honest and talk about how I honestly feel about these movies. I have a lot more to say on these bad boys, but that's a video for another day. For now, I'd recommend watching the original films for real. Find out what it is you like and dislike about them. Are you a casual fan, a diehard nut, someone who doesn't understand why people like them? It's going to be different for everyone, and there's no right or wrong way to feel, and that's okay. I usually try to end these videos with something funny or clever to say, but I can't think of anything. Here, I'll leave with a cliffhanger. The prequels are better than the Disney movies.